What we're doing in showing these quotes is just showing the two positions, because you have America being founded on religious liberty, freedom of conscience, separation of church and state, and then you have the Catholics over here who have the complete opposite mindset.
Correct.
Who want the unification of church and state. So you can see how these two ideologies would come to a head in the foundation of America. That's all we're establishing right now.
And especially when they said, you know, Columbus is going over there to spread the Catholic religion, all these other people, and, you know, Loyola and, or the children of Loyola, there's a specific purpose. And it's not to keep the separation of church and state and to have religious freedom in America. That is not the idea.
Definitely not.
Then it continues, remove the agreement between church and state, and the result will be disputes, large disputes. It will become more difficult to see where the truth lies, and great confusion is certain to rise. That's their opinion. Hence, the Roman pontiffs have never ceased, as circumstances required, to refute and condemn the doctrine of separation of church and state. This is a heresy to them. And we'll continue here. The effect of which is to place the church under the domination of the civil power. It has been a source of bitter grief to us to see the state thus encroached on matters which are within the exclusive jurisdiction of the church.
So we saw in the last episodes about Christian nationalism and how they want to bring the church and the state together. And they don't believe in the separation of church and state. Well, Catholicism also does not believe in the separation of church and state. So as we can see from these quotes, and there is also a group of people in Catholicism that's also pushing for this removal of that separation and a joining of church and state. It's called Catholic integralism. So we have a counterpart in Protestantism and we have a counterpart in Catholicism, all pushing for the same agenda. And of course, in America, we saw Catholics and Protestants and all religions basically mixed together, pushing for the agenda, and that is going right now in America, and they're happily together. So we can see that they've merged. The daughters of the Catholic Church, the mother, are returning to the mother. They are working with the mother, and they are instituting the mother's principles and the mother's ways.
The daughters, according to the Catholic Church, have strayed.
Right.
But they're going to come back.
They are coming back.
They're going to re-embody in themselves, because they are the daughters,
right,
the whole image of what the mother is.
And we have this quote from George Mason: that religion, or the duty which we owe to our Creator and the manner of just discharging it, can be directed only by reason and conviction, not by force or violence. And therefore that all men should enjoy the fullest toleration in the exercise of religion according to the dictates of conscience, unpunished and unrestrained by the magistrate.
That was the founding principles of America.
Exactly. And that is, again, opposed to the Catholic view, which is why you had this battle, if you will, for America coming over at its founding.
Exactly. Now here we have a quote from James Madison to Edward Livingston in 1822. Notwithstanding the general progress made within the 2 last centuries in favor of this branch of liberty and the full establishment of it, in some parts of our country there remains in others a strong bias towards the old error, that without some sort of alliance or coalition between government and religion, neither can be duly supported. So he's saying...
Yeah. That's very fascinating.
Yeah, that there was people who could not get rid of the idea of church and state has to be together.
They left that system, but they thought it probably just that it was implemented poorly.
Right.
But they didn't get that this was like the founding problem.
Right. And that was what part of the reason why there was some intolerance and bigotry shown even by those people who came from all that persecution. They established little colonies that then treated people in similar ways that the Catholic Church treated. It was hard to get it out of their system. They'd been in it for already so long.
Yeah.
Such indeed is the tendency to such a coalition, and such its corrupting influence on both the parties, that the danger cannot be too carefully guarded against. Every new and successful example, therefore, of a perfect separation between ecclesiastical and civil matters is of importance.
Wow.
So here we see those people, remember in the last episode, we're saying there's no such thing. Separation of church and state was never in the Constitution, but it's clearly in the intent of these people who created those things.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. They're not quoting anyone.
No.
They're just making statements, That's what they meant.
Yeah.
That's a great way to explain it. And not actually reading what these same guys were actually saying.
Right. They're not providing evidence. They're just calling it junk, but they're not actually showing. And if they were to look at it, they'd see this. It was the belief of all sects at one time that the establishment of religion by law was right and necessary, that the true religion ought to be established in exclusion of all others, and that the only question to be decided was, which was the true religion?
That's a very important question.
It was.
It all just goes back to who determines what factor? How do we determine what is true and false? If we went back to the Bible, fine, then we wouldn't have a problem with that. But the problem is there's so many different interpretations out there. There's so many different ideas, so many different errors that you can't do it because there's going to be conflict and persecution.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, James Madison wrote to Jasper Adams in 1833, I must admit, moreover, that it may not be easy in every possible case to trace the line of separation between the rights of religion and the civil authority with such distinctness as to avoid collisions and doubts on unessential points. This tendency to a usurpation on one side or the other. And then he talks about how basically it's either one or the other that's going to take over. And
he's acknowledging that it's a little complicated.
It is.
To have this separation. But if you don't, one is going to usurp the other at some point in time. It's just inevitable, right? If you're playing a game of chess, someone's going to win at some point.
Right. And as you pointed out last episode, if you're playing a game and you don't want to be influenced by the other person, then don't play the game.
Yeah.
Because what that person does in the game is going to influence your decisions, your moves, and have an influence.
And here we have just further evidence. We really want to nail this down because people are going to say, well, that's this person or that's that person. This was the predominant view. This is what America was founded on. This is what they taught. And for many different people, for instance, James Madison here, Congress should not establish a religion and enforce the legal observation of it by law, nor compel men to worship God in any manner contrary to their conscience. John Adams, government has no right to hurt a hair of the head of an atheist for his opinions. Let him have a care of his practices.
So in other words, you can mandate civil laws, but not moral laws.
Exactly. The government cannot legislate morality. That's off limits to the civil power. Thomas Jefferson, I am for freedom of religion and against all maneuvers to bring about a legal ascendancy of one sect over another. This is again Thomas Jefferson, the subject of religion, a subject on which I have ever been most scrupulously reserved. I have considered it as a matter between every man and his maker, in which no other, and far less the public, had a right to intermeddle. And this is James Monroe. The religion then of every man must be left to the conviction and conscience of every man, and it is the right of every man to exercise it as these may dictate.
So it shows that there were a lot of voices who thought these things. They put it in writings, they put it in letters, and it is simply not true that separation of church and state was not what was intended.
They're coming over here because they had that form of government in Europe. The church was controlling the state. They came over here to escape that persecution. They wouldn't want to establish the same thing over here because then they have nowhere to run.
Exactly. And as we pointed out last time, the church was controlling the kings, not the kings controlling the church.
Yes.
In fact, it was kings that were excommunicated by the church, and thereby all the citizens in that country were under interdict, or under basically denial of the sacraments and not able to get married, not able to have a Christian funeral. And so it was a very big problem if the king angered the Pope.
Mm-hmm.
And once I think that there was a king, I think it was Henry, who angered the Pope so much and placed his entire country under interdict that he had to go visit the Pope, and the Pope made him stand for 3 days barefoot in the snow. So there was definitely no kingly power.
Yeah.
It was papal power all the way.
And unfortunately, it doesn't take a lot of time for people to forget history.
Yes.
It's a very short amount of time, and it's getting shorter as people have TikTok brain.
Mm-hmm.
It's shorter and shorter and shorter. This was not that long ago that America was founded, but it's been long enough that people don't know the significance. They don't know their history. They don't read anymore.
Mm.
They Google and Facebook and everything and TikTok, everything. And the only things they know is what influencers say
Yes.
about the history.